A widowed millionaire, Alejandro Ruiz, hires an unemployed young woman, Lucia Martinez, to be his date at a charity event. But Alejandro wasn't prepared for what would unfold. Can love overcome the barriers of the past and the pressures of a judgmental world? Find out how this story of new beginnings could change everything. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. In the heart of Madrid, where the sun cast golden rays upon grand facades and lively plazas, Alejandro Ruiz walked through his opulent home, filled with memories that echoed in the empty hallways. The mansion, a testament to his success as a businessman, was adorned with exquisite art and luxurious furnishings, yet it felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. Shadows loomed in every corner, whispering reminders of a life once vibrant, now dulled by the absence of his beloved wife, Elena. As he meandered through the expansive living room, his gaze fell upon a framed photograph resting on a delicate mahogany table. It was a snapshot of a moment frozen in time. Alejandro and Elena, arms wrapped around each other, smiles wide and genuine. The warmth of that day surged through him, but it was swiftly overshadowed by the icy grip of solitude that had taken hold since her passing. The laughter they once shared, the dreams they built together, all now felt like distant echoes, fading with each passing day. He approached the photo, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against the glass, a futile attempt to touch the life they had crafted together. It was hard to reconcile the man he was with the man he had become, a widower navigating a world that felt devoid of joy. Alejandro allowed himself a moment of vulnerability, his heart heavy with grief as he remembered Elena's laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief, and how she could light up even the darkest of days. The emptiness of his home echoed the void in his heart, a stark reminder of what he had lost. With a deep breath, Alejandro turned away from the bittersweet memories and walked toward the kitchen, a space that still bore the traces of her presence. The scent of fresh herbs lingered in the air, remnants of meals they had prepared together, of evenings spent in the warmth of their shared love. He opened the refrigerator, staring blankly at the contents, the vibrant colors of fruits and vegetables contrasting sharply with his mood. He reached for a bottle of water, the coolness a brief respite from the suffocating loneliness. As he leaned against the counter, the weight of his life settled heavily upon him. His days were filled with business meetings and charity events, a whirlwind of activity that did little to fill the void left by Elena. Friends urged him to move on, to find companionship, but how could he? The thought of inviting someone into his life felt like betrayal, a dishonor to the love they had shared. Yet deep down, he was aware that life continued, and he was merely existing, drifting through each day without purpose. Meanwhile, several miles away, in a bustling park frequented by families and dog lovers, Lucia Martinez navigated a different kind of struggle. She was young, vibrant, and filled with dreams, but the weight of her financial burdens pressed down on her. The sound of barking dogs filled the air as she walked a lively pack, each pulling in different directions, eager to explore the vibrant surroundings. The sun shone brightly overhead, but the light did little to uplift her spirits. Lucia's mind was preoccupied with thoughts of overdue bills and dwindling savings, a stark contrast to the joy she once found in her artistic pursuits. She had a passion for painting, a talent nurtured since childhood, but the harsh realities of adulthood had pushed her dreams to the back burner. Each day, she found herself lost in a routine that felt increasingly suffocating, her aspirations fading like the colors on an old canvas. As she stopped to catch her breath, she looked around the park, taking in the laughter of children and the warmth of the sun, longing for a slice of that happiness. In a moment of respite, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through social media, her heart sinking further as she saw friends sharing their successes, their travels, and the art that flourished in their lives. She couldn't help but feel a pang of envy, wishing for the ability to create and share her work with the world. Just as despair began to creep in, her phone buzzed with a message from a friend, offering a glimmer of hope. Her friend mentioned a potential job opportunity, a chance to earn extra income by providing companionship for a wealthy individual attending a charity event. The words danced in front of her eyes, igniting a flicker of curiosity amidst her worries. It was an unusual prospect, but the idea of stepping into a different world, if only for a night, thrilled her. She felt a rush of determination surge through her, a sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. With newfound resolve, Lucia set out to research the opportunity further, her heart racing at the thought of breaking free from her current situation. As she gathered her thoughts, the dogs at her feet tugged at their leashes, eager to resume their adventures. She resumed her walk, but her mind remained focused on the possibility of change. The park, once just a backdrop to her daily struggles, began to transform into a landscape of hope and potential. Back in Alejandro's world, the yearning for connection gnawed at him. The emptiness of his home felt suffocating, the silence deafening. As he paced through the vast corridors, he contemplated the idea of hiring a companion for the upcoming charity event. He had attended countless functions, always feeling like a ghost in his own life. But perhaps this time could be different. Perhaps a fresh face, someone vibrant and full of life, could offer a reprieve from the sorrow that clung to him. With a mix of reluctance and desperation, Alejandro sat at his desk, the polished wood gleaming under the soft glow of a desk lamp. He opened his laptop, the screen illuminating the darkened room, and began drafting an advertisement. He was meticulous, choosing his words carefully, hoping to convey a sense of dignity and respect for the position. He outlined the requirements, emphasizing the need for someone who could navigate social situations with grace, who could bring a breath of fresh air into his otherwise somber existence. As he typed, he felt a strange flutter of anticipation, an unfamiliar sensation that momentarily overshadowed his grief. The thought of meeting someone new, of experiencing a glimpse of life outside the confines of his sorrow, was both exciting and terrifying. He posted the ad, his heart racing as he wondered who might respond. Would they understand the weight of his past? Would they see beyond the facade of wealth and status? Across the city, Lucia stumbled upon the advertisement while scrolling through her phone during a break. The words jumped out at her, resonating with her desire for a change. She felt a pulse of excitement, a sense of possibility that had been absent for far too long. The idea of stepping into a new role, of being someone's companion for an evening, sparked a flame of hope within her. Without hesitation, she clicked to apply, her heart pounding with anticipation. In that moment, unconnected and unaware, the lives of Alejandro and Lucia began to intertwine, each of them seeking something more, both on the precipice of transformation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, they stood at the threshold of their own destinies, unaware that their paths were destined to converge, forever altering the course of their lives. Lucia stood at the massive entrance of Alejandro's home, her heart racing in her chest. The grandeur of the mansion was intimidating, a stark contrast to her modest apartment filled with the remnants of her previous life. As she stepped inside, she was enveloped by an air of opulence. The high ceilings were adorned with intricate moldings, and the walls displayed an array of expensive art pieces, each telling a story of wealth and refinement. Yet, as she moved further into the house, she sensed an underlying stillness, as if the walls themselves were mourning a presence long gone. Alejandro was waiting for her in the spacious living room, his posture rigid and formal. He was clad in an impeccably tailored suit that accentuated his tall frame, yet his expression was anything but welcoming. His dark hair was neatly combed, but the slight furrow in his brow hinted at the turmoil within. Lucia felt a flicker of nervousness wash over her. She could see the sadness etched in his features, a melancholic shadow that seemed to haunt him. She offered him a tentative smile, hoping to bridge the gap between them. Alejandro's lips twitched, but the smile never fully reached his eyes. Instead, he gestured toward a plush sofa, inviting her to sit. As she settled into the softness, she took in the room's opulence, the heavy drapes, the polished marble floors, and the grand piano in the corner that seemed to echo with unplayed melodies. Despite the beauty surrounding her, Lucia felt an unexpected heaviness in the air. As they began to discuss the upcoming charity event, Lucia noticed subtle shifts in Alejandro's demeanor. His voice was calm, yet it lacked the enthusiasm she had anticipated. He spoke of the details, the venue, the guests, the purpose of the event, but there was a detachment in his tone, as if he were reciting a script rather than sharing a vision. Lucia leaned forward, eager to engage him, to draw out the man she sensed lay beneath the surface. Yet, every attempt to lighten the mood was met with a polite nod or a distant gaze. In that moment, she realized that beneath Alejandro's polished exterior lay a profound loneliness. It was as if he were trapped within the walls of his own creation, a fortress built to shield him from the pain of loss. Lucia felt a rush of empathy for him. She could see how he carried the weight of his past, the burden of a love that had defined him, yet was now a ghost that lingered. The thought made her heart ache, and she wished desperately to reach out, to tell him that he was not alone. Despite the somber atmosphere, Lucia maintained her resolve. She was determined to impress him, to prove that she could be more than just a companion for the evening. She shared anecdotes from her life, her struggles with unemployment, and her dreams of a brighter future. As she spoke, she watched Alejandro closely, searching for any flicker of interest in his eyes. Yet, as the minutes passed, she found herself faltering under the weight of his silence. The conversation drifted into a lull, and Lucia seized the moment to observe him more closely. Alejandro's gaze had drifted toward the window, where the golden hues of sunset spilled into the room. She followed his line of sight, noting the way the light danced across his features, softening the hard lines of his jaw. In that fleeting moment, she saw a man lost in thought, a man who had once known joy but was now cloaked in sorrow. As the evening wore on, they began to prepare for the charity event. Lucia offered to help him select an appropriate tie and jacket, wanting to bring a touch of warmth to his somber attire. She moved through his expansive closet, filled with suits that seemed as lifeless as their owner. Choosing a deep blue tie, she held it up for Alejandro's consideration, hoping it would bring out the warmth in his complexion. He accepted it without enthusiasm, and she fastened it around his neck, her fingers brushing against his skin. It was a brief moment of intimacy that sent a jolt through her, a connection that transcended the boundaries of their current relationship. As they stepped out into the night, Lucia felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The charity event was being held in a luxurious hotel, its facade illuminated by soft lights that sparkled like stars. As they entered, the atmosphere buzzed with energy, laughter echoing off the marble floors. Yet, she could sense Alejandro's discomfort amidst the throng of elegantly dressed guests. He stood slightly apart, his posture rigid, scanning the crowd as if searching for an escape. Lucia took a deep breath, summoning her courage. She reached for his arm, offering him a reassuring presence as they navigated through the sea of people. Her heart raced as she noticed the way he stiffened at her touch, the way his eyes darted nervously from one group to another. She couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness over him, an instinctual desire to shield him from the world that seemed to overwhelm him. As the evening progressed, Lucia found herself increasingly attuned to Alejandro's reactions. She observed how he interacted with others, noting the forced smiles and polite nods. He was a man out of place, a solitary figure in a world filled with laughter and lightness. She felt a pang of sadness for him, recognizing that beneath the veneer of wealth and success lay a profound isolation. In a quiet moment, as they stood at the edge of the crowd, Lucia caught Alejandro's gaze. For a brief second, their eyes locked, and she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his expression. It was a look that spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of the pain they both carried, a shared understanding that transcended words. As the night unfolded, Lucia found herself drawing closer to Alejandro. She led him through the event, engaging in conversations with guests, introducing him to people who had come to support the cause. With each interaction, she felt his tension ease slightly, as if he were beginning to thaw under the warmth of her presence. Laughter erupted around them, and for the first time that evening, she glimpsed a hint of a smile on Alejandro's lips, a momentary reprieve from the sadness that clung to him like a shadow. Their connection deepened as they shared stories, laughter bubbling between them like champagne. Lucia felt a thrill at the way Alejandro's eyes lit up when she recounted a particularly humorous incident from her dog-walking adventures. It was a fleeting moment of joy, but it was enough to ignite a spark of hope within her. Perhaps, amidst the opulence and the pain, there was the potential for something more. As the evening drew to a close, Lucia felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't anticipated. She had stepped into Alejandro's world, a world so different from her own, and yet in that space, she had found a connection that resonated deeply within her. It was a fragile bond, one that danced on the edge of vulnerability, but it was real. And in the midst of the glittering crowd, she knew that together, they had begun to weave the threads of a story that neither had expected. In the days that followed the charity event, Alejandro and Lucia found themselves entwined in an unexpected routine, a delicate dance of companionship and discovery. Their shared moments were a balm for Alejandro's desolate heart, and Lucia, with her vivacious spirit, seemed to fill the empty spaces left by his late wife. Each encounter brought light into his somber world, and with every shared smile, he felt the profound weight of his grief begin to lift, if only slightly. One afternoon, the sun bathed Madrid in a golden hue as Alejandro and Lucia strolled through the Retiro Park. The air was fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers, and the laughter of children echoed around them. Lucia's excitement was palpable, her eyes sparkling as she pointed out the various artists displaying their work along the paths. She spoke animatedly about colors and textures, her passion for art evident in every word. Alejandro watched her, entranced by the way her face lit up, the way she seemed to breathe life into the very essence of creativity. As they paused by a small pond, Lucia knelt down to observe the ducks gliding effortlessly across the water. Alejandro found himself captivated not only by the serene scene but by the sheer joy radiating from her. He felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a stir of feelings he had long thought extinguished by the sorrow of his loss. The contrast between Lucia's vibrant energy and his own lingering grief was striking, yet it was this very contrast that drew him closer to her. With a gentle, almost hesitant tone, Lucia began to share stories of her childhood, tales filled with vibrant colors and dreams of becoming an artist. She spoke of how she would spend hours drawing in her sketchbook, lost in a world that was entirely her own. Alejandro listened intently, absorbing the nuances of her experiences, the way her voice carried the weight of her ambitions. As she recounted her struggles with finding a foothold in the art world, he felt a burgeoning desire to support her, to encourage her to chase those dreams that had once seemed so distant. He found himself inspired by her, a feeling that was foreign yet invigorating. Alejandro had spent years in the corporate world, buried under the expectations of success and societal approval, yet here was Lucia, unafraid to pursue her passion. In her presence, he felt a stirring within himself, a whisper that perhaps he, too, could reclaim the pieces of his own identity that had been lost in the shadows of grief. That evening, as they wandered back to Alejandro's grand home, he suggested they set aside some time for Lucia to paint, something she had mentioned with a hint of longing in her voice. The prospect of her creativity filling the empty walls of his house ignited a flicker of hope in him. He envisioned her vibrant brushstrokes bringing warmth and color to the sterile environment he had inhabited, a living testament to the connection they were forging. Lucia's eyes widened with surprise and delight at the suggestion. She had not expected such encouragement from someone of Alejandro's stature, a man of wealth who could easily dismiss her aspirations as trivial. Yet here he was, offering her not just a space to create, but also the validation she so desperately craved. The thought of sharing her art with him filled her with exhilaration and trepidation. Days turned into weeks, and their relationship blossomed in unexpected ways. They developed rituals, like early morning walks with the dogs and late-night strolls under the stars. Each moment spent together seemed to peel back layers of their respective pasts, revealing vulnerabilities that had once felt too raw to share. Lucia learned about Alejandro's late wife, the life they had built together, and the profound love that still resonated in his heart. He spoke of his wife with reverence, his voice tinged with the bittersweet memories of their shared laughter and quiet moments. In return, Lucia opened up about her struggles, the weight of her financial burdens, and the relentless pursuit of a dream that often felt just out of reach. Their conversations were laced with a newfound intimacy, each word a testament to the bond they were forging. Alejandro found himself feeling a sense of purpose in guiding and supporting Lucia, as if in nurturing her dreams, he could also reclaim a part of himself that had been lost to grief. Yet, as their connection deepened, so did the tension within Alejandro. His friends, a circle of wealthy acquaintances bound by shared interests and social standing, began to express their disapproval of his relationship with Lucia. Whispers of astonishment and judgment reached his ears, tainting the joy he found in their time together. The world he had inhabited for so long, the world of privilege and expectation, began to feel suffocating, a gilded cage that threatened to stifle the burgeoning love he felt for Lucia. Alejandro found himself at a crossroads, torn between the loyalty he felt towards his social circle and the burgeoning feelings he had for Lucia. He wanted to shield her from the judgment of his friends, to protect her from the scrutiny that came with his wealth and status. But more than that, he grappled with his own insecurities. Was he truly worthy of her? Could he really step outside the bounds of his established life for a woman from a different world? Despite the mounting pressure, there were moments of clarity that reaffirmed his feelings for Lucia. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace overlooking the city skyline, the sun casting a warm glow over their silhouettes, Alejandro felt a surge of determination. Lucia was not merely a distraction from his grief. She was a catalyst for his transformation, a reminder that life still held beauty and possibility. But the unease continued to grow, especially when Alejandro's friends began to confront him directly, questioning his judgment in spending time with someone of Lucia's social standing. They hinted at the implications of such a relationship, the potential damage to his reputation, and the disapproval it would inevitably invite. It was during one of these encounters, filled with veiled insults and thinly disguised disdain, that Alejandro felt the stirrings of doubt deep within him. He returned home that night, the weight of his friends' opinions pressing heavily on his shoulders. The lavish lifestyle he had built felt increasingly at odds with the simplicity of his connection with Lucia. He sat in his study, the walls adorned with accolades and reminders of his success, but the emptiness in his heart echoed louder than any of those achievements. Yet, as he looked at the photographs of his wife, he remembered the love they had shared, the kind of love that transcended societal expectations and judgment. In that moment of reflection, he realized that life was too short to be shackled by the opinions of others. The happiness he found with Lucia was worth fighting for, worth risking the comfort of his established world. Determined yet conflicted, Alejandro knew he had to confront the growing tension between his feelings for Lucia and the expectations of his social circle. The question of whether he could reconcile these two worlds loomed large in his mind, and as he drifted into an uneasy sleep, he felt the weight of that decision pressing against his chest, a storm brewing on the horizon of his heart. As the days passed, Alejandro and Lucia found themselves entangled in a delicate dance of intimacy and understanding. The stark contrasts between their lives began to blur, revealing a tapestry woven with shared moments that defied the boundaries of their initial arrangement. Alejandro, a man weighed down by the shadows of his past, slowly peeled back the layers of his millionaire facade, allowing Lucia glimpses of the vulnerable soul beneath. They spent evenings in his grand living room, where the soft glow of the fireplace flickered warmly against the opulent decor, creating an inviting atmosphere that felt almost cocoon-like. Lucia's laughter filled the air, a sound that had become a balm to Alejandro's wounded heart. Her presence was like sunlight breaking through a dense fog, illuminating the corners of his life that had long been shrouded in sorrow. She would often sit cross-legged on the plush carpet, her vibrant energy contrasting sharply with the luxurious but cold surroundings. In those moments, Alejandro found himself captivated not just by her beauty, but by the way she breathed life into the very fabric of his existence. He listened intently as she recounted tales of her struggles and dreams, her voice carrying the weight of hope and yearning that resonated deeply within him. One particular evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the room, Alejandro suggested they delve into his collection of family photos. He reached for an ornate box resting on a mahogany shelf, its surface polished to a gleam. With a gentle flick of the lid, he revealed a treasure trove of memories, snapshots of laughter, love, and the fleeting moments that had shaped his life. Each photograph told a story, a reminder of the joy that once filled his home, now replaced by an echoing silence. Lucia's fingers brushed against the photographs, her curiosity piqued. As she sifted through the images, she found herself drawn to a particular picture, one that seemed to leap out at her from the pile. It was a portrait of Alejandro's late wife, her smile radiant and eyes sparkling with life. Lucia's heart raced. The resemblance was uncanny. There was something in the way the woman held her head, the curve of her lips, and the brightness in her gaze that mirrored Lucia's own features. A chill ran down her spine as the realization settled over her like a heavy cloak. The room fell silent as Lucia turned to Alejandro, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. He looked up, his brow furrowed in concern, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. As she held the photograph in her hands, a knot formed in her stomach. This was more than mere coincidence. It felt like a cosmic thread binding their lives together in ways she could not yet comprehend. Alejandro, noticing the tension, moved closer, his heart pounding with trepidation. He had always been protective of the memories of his late wife, hesitant to share them with anyone, especially someone as vibrant and full of life as Lucia. But now, confronting the undeniable connection between Lucia and his past, he felt the walls he had carefully constructed beginning to crumble. They stood in the quiet of the room, the photograph acting as a bridge between two worlds, his world of grief and loss, and her world of hope and a desperate desire for connection. Lucia's voice, though unspoken, echoed in the silence. She was grappling with her own emotions, torn between the stark reality of Alejandro's history and the bond they had forged in such a short time. The image of his wife was a reminder of the love that had once filled his life, a love that had been lost to time and circumstance. Yet, as she looked into Alejandro's eyes, she saw more than just a man grappling with his past. She saw a soul yearning for companionship, for someone who could fill the void left behind. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Lucia took a deep breath, her heart racing as she ventured into the realm of vulnerability. The photograph felt heavy in her hands, a tangible reminder of the complexities of their connection. She understood that this moment would redefine their relationship, forcing them to confront the shadows that lingered in the corners of their hearts. Alejandro, too, felt the weight of the moment. He had never anticipated that his life would intertwine with someone so reminiscent of his past. The specter of his late wife loomed large, but as he gazed into Lucia's eyes, he recognized something beautiful and new, a chance for healing, for rediscovery. He had spent so long shrouded in grief, afraid to let anyone in, but Lucia was different. She was vibrant, alive, and she made him want to embrace life again. As the evening wore on, the conversation that ensued was laden with emotion. Alejandro spoke of his late wife, sharing anecdotes that brought her spirit to life in a way that felt both cathartic and terrifying. Lucia listened, her heart breaking for the man who stood before her, a man who had loved deeply and lost profoundly. Each story revealed not just the essence of Alejandro's late wife, but also the depth of his love for her, a love that had shaped him into the man he was today. In the days that followed, an invisible thread seemed to connect them even more tightly. Their moments together were filled with laughter and shared glances that spoke volumes. Yet, the underlying tension of Alejandro's past cast a long shadow over their burgeoning relationship. As they navigated the complexities of their feelings, external pressures began to seep into their world, threatening to unravel the fragile bond they had built. Alejandro's friends, who had once been a source of support, began to express their disapproval of his relationship with Lucia. Their whispers followed him like a dark cloud, sowing seeds of doubt in his mind. He found himself caught in a web of societal expectations, torn between the life he had built and the love that was blossoming in the most unexpected of places. The glittering world of high society, with its judgments and hierarchies, loomed large, reminding him of the chasm that separated him from Lucia. Lucia, too, sensed the shift in Alejandro's demeanor. The warmth and intimacy they had shared began to wane under the weight of external pressures. She could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the way he hesitated before sharing his thoughts, as if he were weighing the consequences of every word. The laughter that had once danced between them started to fade, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that settled in their conversations. Despite the growing tension, Alejandro's heart remained steadfast in its desire for Lucia. He fought against the tide of doubt, determined to carve a path that would lead them through the storm. But as the days turned into weeks, the strain began to take its toll. He found himself standing at a crossroads, torn between the expectations of his friends and the undeniable connection that had blossomed with Lucia. The weight of their situation pressed heavily on him, and he began to question whether he could withstand the scrutiny of his social circle. The thought of letting go of Lucia, of returning to the solitary life that had once consumed him, felt unbearable. Yet, the fear of judgment loomed large, a specter that haunted him in quiet moments. Lucia was no stranger to the complexities of life. She understood the weight of societal expectations, having faced her own share of struggles. But she couldn't shake the feeling that their connection was something rare and beautiful, worth fighting for despite the odds stacked against them. With each passing day, she found herself grappling with her own feelings of inadequacy, worried that she was merely a fleeting distraction in Alejandro's world, a world that felt so far removed from her own. As they continued to navigate the shifting dynamics of their relationship, the question loomed larger than ever. Could love truly transcend the barriers that life had placed between them? In the quiet moments they shared, Alejandro and Lucia found the strength to confront the challenges ahead. But the storm was brewing, and the consequences of their choices were yet to be unveiled. The extravagant party was in full swing, the atmosphere thick with laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. Alejandro stood at the entrance, a charming smile plastered on his face, but his eyes betrayed a sense of unease. The opulent ballroom of his friend's mansion was adorned with glimmering chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the guests, all impeccably dressed in designer attire. Yet, despite the lavish surroundings, Alejandro felt a chill creeping into his bones as he scanned the crowd, searching for the one familiar face that brought him solace. Lucia, dressed in a stunning emerald gown that accentuated her natural beauty, arrived shortly after, her entrance seemingly unnoticed amidst the sea of well-heeled socialites. Alejandro's heart raced as he caught sight of her, her vibrant spirit striking a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere around them. However, the moment was fleeting. As she stepped further into the room, the whispers began. Hushed tones exchanged like currency among the elite, each word laced with judgment and disdain. Alejandro watched as Lucia's radiant smile faltered, the weight of their gazes pressing down on her. The whisperings grew louder, each comment a sharp reminder of the societal divide that loomed over their budding relationship. He could see her shoulders tense, her posture shifting from confident to defensive, as she instinctively sought to blend into the background. It pained him to witness her discomfort, a stark reminder of the barriers they faced. The evening unfolded with a cacophony of laughter and superficial pleasantries, but underneath it all, an undercurrent of tension simmered. Alejandro's friends, a group well-versed in the art of subtlety, targeted Lucia with their disapproving glances and whispered barbs. He could almost hear their thoughts. What is he doing with her? She doesn't belong here. Each unspoken word hung in the air like a noose, tightening around his heart. As the night progressed, Alejandro found himself caught in a whirlwind of social obligations, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with people who had little interest in him beyond his wealth. He stole glances at Lucia, who stood near the edge of the room, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. The laughter of the crowd felt distant to him, overshadowed by the growing chasm between them. Eventually, Alejandro made his way to her side, a desperate attempt to shield her from the prying eyes and judgmental whispers that surrounded them. He leaned in, attempting to share a joke or a light-hearted comment, but his words felt hollow against the backdrop of her unease. Lucia managed a weak smile, but the light in her eyes had dimmed. She seemed almost a ghost, haunting the space rather than truly inhabiting it. The tension escalated when a group of Alejandro's closest friends approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disdain. They circled Lucia like hawks eyeing their prey, their insincere compliments dripping with condescension. Alejandro stood by, feeling increasingly trapped. The air thickened with a palpable sense of hostility, and he could sense the judgment radiating from his friends like a cold wind. One of them, a particularly arrogant man named Miguel, had always been the loudest in their circle. He seized the opportunity to belittle the situation, making a pointed remark about how Alejandro had always preferred the company of those who understood their place. The laughter that followed felt like daggers aimed directly at Lucia, who flinched at the sting of the words. Alejandro's blood boiled. He felt a surge of anger rising within him, a protective instinct that clashed violently with the social norms he had always adhered to. He stepped forward, confronting Miguel and the others, his voice low but firm. The argument escalated quickly, words exchanged like blows, and for the first time in years, Alejandro found himself at the center of a conflict that had nothing to do with business deals or financial gain. Lucia, feeling the tension reach a breaking point, stood frozen, her heart racing. She felt exposed, a target in a game she did not choose to play. As the argument continued, she could sense the shifting dynamics around her. The laughter had died down, and the guests turned their attention toward the unfolding drama. She felt humiliated, as if she were the cause of the discord between Alejandro and his friends. With the fire of the confrontation burning brightly, Lucia's resolve began to wane. She had entered the evening hopeful, believing that perhaps she could find acceptance in Alejandro's world, but now it felt as if she was being stripped of her dignity. The whispers that had once been mere background noise now roared in her ears, drowning out the love and connection she had felt with Alejandro. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes as she realized that no matter how fiercely Alejandro defended her, the opinions of his friends would always loom large over their relationship. In a moment of heartbreak, she turned away, her heart heavy with disappointment. Alejandro's voice rose above the crowd, but she could no longer bear to listen. As she made her way toward the exit, the weight of her decision settled upon her. She didn't want to be the source of conflict in Alejandro's life, nor did she wish to be a project for him to fix. The lavish party that had once seemed like an opportunity for acceptance now felt like a gilded cage, and she refused to let herself be trapped within it. Outside, the cool night air welcomed her like an old friend, and she took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within her. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she walked, each step heavy with the pain of realization. She returned to her dog-walking job, the simple act of caring for her furry companions providing a semblance of comfort. The dogs welcomed her with wagging tails and playful barks, oblivious to the turmoil she had just endured. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the argument reached a crescendo. Alejandro's anger dissipated into confusion and guilt as he watched Lucia slip away. He turned back to his friends, fury coursing through his veins as he faced the people he had once considered allies. Their laughter felt foreign, their judgment suffocating, and in that moment, he recognized the true cost of his social circle. As the night wore on, Alejandro stood alone in the ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of a party that had lost all its charm. The laughter and chatter faded into the background as he grappled with the realization of what he had lost. The connection he had forged with Lucia was unlike anything he had experienced in years, and now, it felt irrevocably damaged. He thought of the warmth she brought into his life, the laughter they had shared, and the way she had made him feel seen in a world that often demanded he remain invisible. The more he reflected, the clearer it became that the choice was simple. He could either conform to the expectations of his friends or fight for the relationship that had brought him back to life. As he walked through the emptying ballroom, Alejandro's heart ached with the knowledge that he had let fear dictate his actions. He had to find Lucia, to make her understand that she was worth fighting for, that their connection transcended the judgment of others. The night may have ended in chaos, but it had ignited a fire within him, one that would not be easily extinguished. As the sun dipped low over Madrid, casting a warm golden hue across the city, Alejandro found himself grappling with the weight of a new revelation that threatened to shatter the fragile peace he had built since meeting Lucia. He had been pacing the polished marble floors of his expansive living room, the silence of the house amplifying the turmoil within him. The echo of footsteps was a stark reminder of the emptiness that lingered in the corners of his life. Yet today, something was different. The news he had just received from an old acquaintance gnawed at him, stirring a tempest of emotions that he had thought he had buried deep beneath layers of grief and societal expectations. The friend, once close and now a distant figure in his life, had revealed a disturbing truth. There were those among his social circle who had actively conspired to undermine his relationship with Lucia. They had whispered poison into his ears, suggesting that a man of his stature should not mingle with someone like her, someone they deemed beneath him. This revelation struck Alejandro like a lightning bolt, illuminating the insidious nature of the people he had once considered allies. The thought that they would stoop so low, driven by their own insecurities and prejudices, ignited a fierce determination within him. He could no longer tolerate the judgmental stares and the whispering tongues that had plagued his every interaction since he had begun seeing Lucia. With newfound resolve, Alejandro decided to confront his friends at the upcoming gathering they had planned. He envisioned the scene vividly. The opulent chandeliers overhead, the clinking of glasses, and the laughter that would echo through the grand hall. But beneath that veneer of sophistication lay an undercurrent of deception and elitism that he could no longer ignore. He spent the days leading up to the event in a daze, rehearsing the words he would say, feeling the weight of their implications. The night of the gathering arrived, and Alejandro stepped into the room, his heart pounding in his chest. The guests, dressed in their finest attire, swirled around him like a kaleidoscope of privilege and entitlement. Yet, for the first time, he felt like an outsider among them, an intruder in a world that no longer represented who he was or who he wished to be. He spotted familiar faces, each one a reminder of the expectations that had shackled him for so long. They exchanged polite nods and hollow smiles, oblivious to the storm brewing within him. As the evening wore on, Alejandro felt the tension rise like a tide. He could sense the whispers gathering strength, the glances exchanged among his friends laden with judgment. Finally, he could bear it no longer. He stood, drawing the attention of the crowd, the room falling silent as he cleared his throat. His voice rang out, steady and resolute, cutting through the murmurings like a knife. He recounted the events that had led him to Lucia, painting a portrait of a woman who had breathed life back into his existence. He spoke of her laughter, her dreams, and the way she had seen him, not as a millionaire but as a man grappling with loss and searching for connection. With every word, he felt the shackles of his past begin to loosen, the oppressive weight of their expectations lifting off his shoulders. The room, once filled with the sound of champagne flutes clinking, now echoed with the stunned silence of his friends. As he exposed their hypocrisy and the undercurrents of jealousy that had fueled their disdain, he felt liberated. The truth, raw and unfiltered, poured from him, and in that moment, he reclaimed his narrative. He looked into the faces of those who had once held power over him, seeing not friends but adversaries who had attempted to dictate the course of his happiness. The fallout was swift. Gasps erupted, and the once jovial atmosphere turned electric with tension. Alejandro felt a weight lift as he watched the masks of his friends crack, revealing their true selves, selfish, scared, and petty. The confrontation left him shaken but invigorated. He stepped away from the crowd, the cacophony of disbelief and anger fading into the background. He had broken free from the invisible chains that had bound him, but he knew that the real test lay ahead. He had to find Lucia and make amends. The memory of her face, shadowed by hurt and confusion, haunted him as he raced to the park where they had first met, the site of their blossoming connection. The park was a sanctuary, the trees whispering secrets in the gentle breeze, but it felt emptier than usual. Shadows danced along the pathways, and the laughter of children echoed in the distance, a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. He scanned the area, his heart racing, desperate to find her. But as he walked, the weight of his actions pressed heavily on his chest. Memories of their time together flooded his mind. The warmth of her hand, the sparkle in her eyes, and the way she had made him feel alive again. Each moment replayed in vivid detail, a reminder of what he had nearly lost. Finally, he spotted her sitting on a bench, her face turned away from him, gazing at the ground as if searching for answers in the blades of grass. She looked so small and vulnerable in that moment, and Alejandro felt a pang of regret stab at his heart. He approached slowly, unsure of how to breach the chasm that had formed between them. As he drew nearer, she turned her head slightly, and their eyes met, a moment suspended in time that seemed to hold the weight of their unspoken words. With a deep breath, he gathered his thoughts, the apology he had rehearsed tumbling forth in a rush. He spoke of his foolishness, of how he had allowed the opinions of others to cloud his judgment. He confessed his love for her, the revelation washing over him like a tide, cleansing the remnants of doubt that had lingered in his heart. He pleaded for her forgiveness, promising to fight for them, to stand against the world that had tried to tear them apart. Lucia's expression softened as she listened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He could see the internal battle waging within her, the echoes of their past confrontation reverberating in the air. But as he spoke, a flicker of hope ignited in her gaze, and he knew he had touched something deep within her. The pain of their separation began to dissolve, replaced by the warmth of understanding and shared dreams. In that moment, they closed the distance between them, their arms wrapping around one another as if they were two pieces of a puzzle finally reunited. As they embraced, Alejandro felt the weight of the world lift off his shoulders, the burdens of judgment and expectation fading away. They stood in the tranquility of the park, a world apart from the chaos that had threatened to engulf them. Together, they could face anything. The shadows of their pasts no longer loomed over them, but instead, they became a backdrop to the vibrant future they could build side by side. Hand in hand, they stepped away from the bench, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, two souls intertwined, unburdened by the chains of their pasts, walking toward a shared horizon filled with promise and love.